Hello everyone and welcome to the channel. I'm Emmanuel, I'm an airline pilot, and welcome to the cruise tutorial for the Flight Sim Studios Boeing 727. You might have wondered why I started this one just before reaching the climb. The reason is simple: we got to keep an eye on our flight plan as we are approaching the last waypoint we have entered. So something that you will periodically need to do is to re-enter your current flight plan waypoints in the INS. Obviously, if you're using the GPS for navigation, you don't need to do this, and you can simply follow the GPS. But since we are flying a 727, we are doing proper old school navigation over here. So what do we have to do? Well, let's go ahead and grab our flight plan right up here and start entering some more waypoints. You can see we're currently en route from leg number 7, or rather waypoint number 7, towards waypoint number 8. So looking at the numbers we entered here, we're flying from Dean-Cross towards Lakey. And waypoint 9, Vamet, is the last one we have. So once we overfly number 9, the aircraft would fly back to waypoint number 1. So the cycle over here goes from 9 back to 1. So what we got to do in order to continue to fly along our planned route is we're going to re-enter a new waypoint number 1, and in this case this is going to be Obuni. So let's go to waypoints and then number 1 in the selector, and now we got to enter the coordinates. Again, remember our setup tutorial on the ground, so we go for north, and that's going to be 53547, insert, west 2446, insert, and that's number 1 now entered as Obuni. So let's go ahead and write a 1 next to that on our flight plan. Then we go ahead and we enter Calda, which is north 53465, insert, west 2386, insert, and mark that one on the flight plan as well. Next up is going to be Craft, so that's number 3, and we can enter the coordinates here as well. 5337.6, and the west coordinates 2323. Insert. Waypoint number 4 is going to be Barton, and that is going to be north 53282, insert, west 2257, insert. Okay, number 4 is entered. Off we go with the next one. That's going to be number 5, and that is going to be Lovell. So number 5 is going to be 53151, and the west coordinates 2165, insert. So lots of inputs that we have to make over here. We'll just stop this for a second at number 5, because we have leveled off at our cruising level. So reaching the cruise level, altitude is intercepted. Let's go ahead and set our thrust for the cruise. Now, initially, you can see we have accelerated a little bit to Mach 0.84, but we want to cruise at Mach 0.80. So the buck is set, and what we're going to do is very slight adjustments. Normally, your EPR during the cruise is going to be between about 1.8, 1.9-ish. So make only very small inputs to your thrust levers in order to adjust your aircraft's cruising speed. So, for example, something like this. Very small change, or like this. Very small change. And that is all you need in order to change your airspeed. The smaller the input, the better it is. Basically, we will wait until our speed is round about where we want it to be. So right now it's about Mach 0.81, Mach 0.80. So that's roughly what we want to fly. So what I'm going to do now is, first of all, I will simply set my EPR to round about the target. So something between 1.8 and 1.9. Something like this. And now we'll just wait and see what happens. If the speed continues to drop, we might have to increase thrust a little bit more. If it starts to increase, we have to decrease thrust a little bit. The important thing is that you do small inputs and monitor where it's going. So right now we can see that it is just slightly decreasing. So again, just watch the input over here. Very slight increment in thrust, very slight increment in EPR, about 0.05. And now we are going to monitor once again what's going to happen. And like that, it's pretty easy to actually fly your cruising speed more or less accurately in the Boeing 727. So that's really how to do it, and that's how to maintain the speed accurately in this type of aircraft. Now, if you have an auto throttle fitted, which is available as optional equipment, remember you can go up here onto the aircraft tab, auto throttle switch, show. That auto throttle is quite dumb. You engage it, and then it is going to maintain whatever the speed buck is currently set to, which is normally the current indicated airspeed. So that's about as easy as it is. However, we're going to fly the conventional way, we're going to leave this out, and you will see that we don't actually need an auto throttle at all. It is quite easy to navigate with this aircraft. Alright, as our flight goes along, we gotta keep an eye on our INS flight plan down here, always keep the waypoints up to date, and I'm just going to enter a couple more, but I will do that off screen, so I see you again in a few moments for the rest of this cruising tutorial. So we have entered a couple more waypoints, and you can see I've now entered everything up to number 3 once again over here. Now be careful that you do not enter anything that is active in the current flight plan. So I've entered everything up to number 3, but since we're currently navigating from number 4 to number 5, if we now went ahead and changed waypoint number 4, then the airplane would fly to a completely different route, as we would have changed the beginning of the current route segment. You can see it's just switched on to waypoint number 5 to number 6. So now we can go ahead and enter waypoint number 4 once again. So that is going to be 51172. And the east coordinate there, 1032. And like that we can keep our INS up to date all the time and keep flying along our route. Alright, so that much about the INS navigation. Now let's go ahead and get rid of that for a second. But we can go ahead already and do the next thing, and that's going to be fuel checks. So you don't have a fancy FMS or anything here. So, well, we gotta help ourselves with what we have available. So we've just overflown waypoint number 6. You can see number 6 is now the from point. So looking up in the flight plan, number 6 up here is Listo. So we've just overflown Listo. And we can go ahead and check our fuel, which we can do on the flight engineer's station. So back here we got our fuel values, and you can see that we have roughly 4,000 pounds, a little bit more than that, say 4,100 in each of those tanks. A little bit less over here, so, because engine number 3 has been running for a bit longer, so we got 4,100 plus 4,000 is 8,100 plus 3,900. So we're looking at 12,000 pounds of fuel on board the airplane. Alright, Listo, so you can see, entering that in the flight plan, that we have actually burned quite a bit more than what was forecast. I can explain the reason why that is. It happened because I did all those explanations on the ground with the engines running. So we used a lot more taxi fuel than we should have by default. But think about that, review how much fuel you are using and how much fuel you have, and like that you can do your fuel management in the flight. Also, you should have written down your departure time, and then you can enter your times overhead and your predicted times overhead and compare that to monitor your flight's progress. So for example, let's say that Listo was expected to be overflown at 38, then we could now look at the watch in our aircraft. Okay, it's 38, so you enter that in both fields, and like that you know, okay, we are flying on schedule exactly as we should. Alright. So that much about monitoring our fuel. Now let's talk about managing our fuel. As you can see by looking at the gauges, the wing tanks are smaller than the center tank is. So the center tank can take more fuel than the wing tanks can. You would depart by feeding all engine from its respective fuel tank as we are doing it at the moment. So you can see at the moment, since our thrust feed valves for the wing tanks are closed, engine number 1 is receiving fuel from fuel tank number 1, number 2 receives fuel from tank 2, and engine number 3 receives fuel from tank number 3. If you wanted to feed any engine from any tank, you can do that through the thrust feed valves down here. So why would you want to do that? The most common reason is because if you're departing with a fuel amount that is greater than what the two wing tanks can take, plus the center tank at the same level as the wing tank. So let's say the wing tanks can take 10,000 pounds. If you have 20,000 in the center tank, obviously you want to use that fuel from the center tank first, so that all three fuel tanks are equal and at an equal level. So in this case, how would you do that? It's quite easy. Number 1, turn on all the thrust feed valves. Never turn off a fuel pump without ensuring the thrust feed valves are open. If you turn off the fuel supply here, your aircraft is simply going to shut down. You can easily kill an engine here. So now that all our thrust feed valves are open, we can go ahead and turn the fuel pumps of those tanks of which we do not want to use fuel off. So let's say, for example, let's imagine we had 20,000 pounds of fuel in the center tank and we want to use only that fuel. Then I would open all the thrust feed valves and turn off the fuel pumps of the respective wing tanks, like that. And now the center tank is feeding all three engines. And you can see all three engines continue to run. Now, once our fuel in the center tank has decreased to the same level that you have in the wing tanks, you can go ahead and reverse that procedure. So right now we have round about 4,000 pounds of fuel in every one of those tanks. So let's go ahead and ensure that each tank feeds its respective engine. First step, turn on the fuel pumps. All of them. When the fuel pumps are running and the low pressure lights are out, close the thrust feed valves of the two outer tanks. As always with the thrust feed valve, check that the light is still working when the valve has been in transit, for the reason I explained on the ground already. And that is all there is to it, to your fuel management. That is all you need to do. That is how you can manage your fuel. Next up, we have the fuel heater system. So you can monitor the fuel temperature on the gauge down here. The fuel temperature is going to decrease throughout the flight. If you look at the gauge, you can see the current outside air temperature is somewhere at about minus 13, minus 14 degrees TAT. The actual outside air temperature is much lower than that, so just keep it in mind for now. But those minus 14 degrees of course mean that the fuel is going to start cooling down, and that is something that we need to take into consideration. Now, when the indicated fuel temperature, the one on the gauge down here, is 0 degrees centigrade or cooler, you want to start using the fuel heaters in order to heat up the fuel in case either any icing exists at the current conditions, or when you are descending for your landing. So if the fuel is 0 degrees or colder and icing conditions exist, or you are in the descent, turn on the fuel heat valves like this, observe the in-transit light, and when the light goes out, you know the fuel heater is operating. When that thing is operating, take timing for 1 minute and thereafter turn it back off again. Again, observe the light goes on, goes out, test that the light is still working in order to ensure that the valve has transited completely. The last thing we need to manage manually is the packs. So when we're in cruise flight, we basically should have the cooling doors completely closed. So let's go ahead and take those switches down, ensure that the cooling doors are closing completely, And basically what we want to do is to maintain the temperature at or below 45 degrees centigrade. So the pack temperature, that is, not the temperature that is fed into the cabin. Unfortunately, at the moment, the version of the 727 that I'm using to record this has these gauges static, so you can't really do anything there. But just to get it into your flow, to operate those doors so that the pack temperature is 45 degrees or less in cruise flight. Well, and that is all there is to it that you gotta do while your airplane is in cruise. So, keep monitoring your aircraft performance, use en route VORs in order to back up your INS. So, for example, once again, if we are looking at our en route chart, you can see that we're currently flying down here from Lakey south eastbound. We do have Manchester VOR here, 113.55, that we can tune, as it is en route. And then of course we have Honeycomb, which is actually on our route, 113.65. So my recommendation here is tune Manchester in number 2 and tune Honeycomb in number 1. So 113.65 number 1, 113.55 number 2, and that way you can monitor your position independent of the INS as we are flying along the route. Okay, so 113.65 going into here, 113.55 going into here. And now we can monitor those along our route. So you can see number 2 is already showing to the back. So we have already overflown that station. Okay, and that is basically how you monitor your flight's progress. So that basically concludes our cruise tutorial. Thank you very much for watching, everyone. As always, if you like the video, be sure to like, comment and subscribe. And if you're up for more, I would appreciate to see you all again as a subscriber to the channel. Finally, if you really love what I'm doing over here, why not consider a small donation through the Buy Me Coffee link in the video description below. Thank you for watching, and I see you all again on the next one.